I'm Sean Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend here on 980 CGME and 650 CKOM. I'm your host, Sean Haney of RealAgriculture.com. Hope you had yourself a great week. The week went well. You got done what you needed to. And, you know, when I think about many of you, I'm hoping you got some rain. Very frustrating situation. Really in motion across the province of Saskatchewan. A lot of people really worried about where we are with our crops and where we are not with some of our crops. Even some of the areas that maybe started out okay, really on the struggle bus here at this point as we reach mid-July. Big time concern, I think. And if you're trying to sort out, hey, what's the yield going to be? What's the production going to be like this year? I think something like canola is incredibly difficult to try to sort out what that yield is going to be. I can tell you that although there are some real concerns in Saskatchewan in some pockets, there is also, it's a lot worse in Alberta. There's also some poor spots in Manitoba as well. But a lot of people trying to sort out now, what does this mean for the markets going forward? What does it mean for farm profitability as we really try to sort out some of these challenges? Mother Nature not exactly cooperating in many parts. And of course, next week, it's going to be Ag in Motion in Saskatoon. I know many of you will be attending. I know that there's going to be a lot of people from RealAg down at the grounds. I'm going to be down there on Tuesday. I believe it'll be on the Gormley show on Tuesday. Looking forward to that in person. Be a lot of fun to be on John's program. I know many of you listen to John throughout the week, and it's a big part of the reason I was so excited about being here for RealAg on the Weekend to broadcast to you on Saturdays, talk agriculture, is the fact that I know so much of our audience at Real Agriculture listens to these stations with RealCo because of the fact that John Gormley's on them. So, yeah, that's what attracted us to 980 CGME and 650 CKOM for sure. Today on RealAg on the Weekend, you know what? We're going to tackle some of your emails. We're going to tackle some of the questions that you have. A little bit unstructured here today, but we're gonna get after it for sure. We're going to talk a little bit about what we can expect from this canola market. We got some commentary from John Dreger from Left Field Commodity Research. I want to address the Bank of Canada raising rates on, was it Wednesday they did? We're now at 5% of the Bank of Canada rate. The most common question I'm getting, and one of the most common questions I'm asking you, the farmer, is do you think this starts to put a little bit of a pause on land prices? And the jury's out, to be quite honest. And cash has something to for sure do with that. And we'll talk a little bit today about Ag in Motion and next week and some things that I'm looking forward to as we head into Saskatoon and catch up with the latest and greatest of the things that are happening in the world of agriculture. Hey, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can definitely send me an email. shaney@realagriculture.com is my email. Real Agriculture is all over social media. So YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads. Earlier this week on the RealAg Radio podcast, I actually made a new rule. Before we can add new social media platforms, because of course Threads, which is Instagram's new Twitter-like application, if we're going to add new social media applications, we need to remove one. And if I told you that, which one would you remove? I think for me it's Snapchat. The only reason I use Snapchat at this point is because we have like a family group chat on Snapchat that's a lot of fun. I wouldn't say there's nothing serious in there whatsoever. It's more of like a kind of, in many ways, it's kind of us picking on each other. And it incorporates my wife and I and the kids, but also my sister and her family, my brother, my parents, my in-laws. It's quite a big group, and it's a lot of fun. But you could do that in WhatsApp. You could do that other places too. So I'd maybe cut out Snapchat. But I'm not really even doing TikTok. So maybe it's TikTok because I don't even use that. Is there one that you would cut out, or have you just kind of left social media altogether? That's one of the things I would like to look at with some of our Real Agri Studies market research work that we do, is some of your use as the farmer, the rancher, some of your use of social media platforms. It's I don't know. There's good and bad days for sure, but the one that I find the most useful, to be honest with you, is YouTube. There's no bones about it. I think that YouTube is one of the most useful tools, and I think you do too, because we've seen our YouTube audience grow significantly with RealAgriculture. So if you are on YouTube, search us out. We got tons of agronomic resources on there, on-demand videos, agronomy, machinery, really just tons of interviews throughout the week. Make sure you hit subscribe as well and become a subscriber. That doesn't cost you anything, and whatever. You just join the fun, the education. It's a good time. What else? Oh, hey, geez, almost forgot the RealAg feedback line. That's right, 855-776-6147. Now, going back the last couple weeks, we had a poll running at RealAgriculture.com, and I find this really interesting. You know, a lot of times we talk about, you know, what do the numbers say? What does research say? Because if research shows that I should do something or there's a proven practice, then, you know, I'll do it, right? And we've seen people leverage science a lot of times in this sort of manner. Well, you know, science says, and everybody has their own version of science. There is no doubt about that. We definitely found out about that during the pandemic, that there's no, with GMOs. People arguing both sides of that issue, and they'll both refer to science. So none of these things are necessarily that black and white, but a lot of times research does show that certain practices are in our best interests and lead to the outcome that we are looking for. We see this all the time in agronomics, right? All the time in agronomics. If you get your crops, and a lot of this research comes out of corn, but I think it's true for a lot of crops. If you launch that crop, if you get emergence out of the ground at the same time, like if that not just is the crop consistent in terms of its staging, but does it emerge out of the ground within hours of each other? All those different little plants. If you get even emergence, you're helping yourself from a yield perspective. And if that crop emerges over a series of days, that can definitely lead to lower yield. Okay? A lot of this, and you hear that in the corn agronomy market all the time. Okay, so we know that practice, what that leads to. Okay? Proven practice. So we've been running a poll on RealAgriculture.com asking people, do you write down your goals? Okay? Do you write them down? They could be on a napkin, they could be on a piece of paper, maybe they're in a Word document, but do you take the time to write those down? Now, there's personal goals, right? There's health goals, there's family goals, there's business goals, of course, and they could be a goal for the day. They could be for the month, the quarter, the year. Maybe it's a 10-year goal. You know, in 10 years, we want to be farming X amount of land and have this kind of return. You know, or my goal is to, you know, try to leave a legacy for my kids to be able to take over the farm. You know, those are kind of goals that people write down. Now, there's the question: do you write down your goals? And what's really interesting, even though the research shows that you're putting yourself in a much higher probability of succeeding in that goal if you actually write it down than if you don't, people still aren't doing it. Okay, so the research is conclusive. Dr. Gail Matthews, a psychology professor at Dominican University in California, did a study on goal setting with 267 participants. She found that you are 42% more likely to achieve your goals by just writing them down. Remember, 42% more likely to achieve your goals just by writing them down. Well, we found out from farmers, they're not writing their goals down, even though the research shows differently. So 57% said, nope, not writing them down. There was 12% that said, no, but I plan to start. Not sure what's preventing you from so, but the 12% saying no, but I will start. So now we're looking at 69% of people saying they really currently do not write their goals down. 15% said yes and revisit often. And 18% said yes, but rarely look at the list. So 15%, small group. It's actually it's not the smallest in the pool. It's second smallest, but 15% saying, yes, I write them down and I revisit often. I think we really help ourselves out here if we change this. The research showed 42% more likely to achieve your goals if you actually write them down. It doesn't take that long. No one's going to hold you to them. Just write them down. So there's a bit of a challenge for people maybe to think about that. And you may think it's kind of cheesy. Why do I have to write them down? They can change. Yeah, of course they can change. But write them down. It may be a good practice for you to do so. Let me know if you do or don't. shaney@RealAgriculture.com. Hey, let's take a break. We'll be right back with more of Real Ag on the weekend. When we come back, you're listening to 980 CJME and 650 CKOM.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds. If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
If you are down on the grounds next week at the Ag in Motion show, make sure if you, I'll be there, like I said, Tuesday. And if you do see me, please say hello. And I love hearing from the Real Ag on the Weekend audience. And it's great to chat with you here every single weekend. A lot of fun. I look forward to this. It's we have some good conversations, get some great feedback for sure. One of the questions I got a lot of this week, and actually when we had a panel, farmer panel on Friday's Real Ag Radio podcast, I asked about, does the Bank of Canada increasing the rate to 5%, does that start to slow down land prices? And what was interesting is Stephen Vandervalk from Fort Macleod, Alberta, really good farmer, super business savvy. He was also joined by Nathan Niebor from Bow Island, Alberta, and also a very successful farm. And we talked about it. And what I found interesting is that both of them had the same response. It hasn't till this point. And so the question is, when does it? Because you got to figure it does at some point. You just run some of those exercises. All the different banks have like a mortgage calculator, and run some of the differences to, like, say 2% ago between, say, 7% and 5%, and some of those payments on the kind of money that people are borrowing. Everybody has different land prices based on where you are. But last year we saw a pretty significant rise in land prices in Saskatchewan, according to FCC's land value survey. And you got to kind of wonder. Actually, I think Saskatchewan led the country in terms of percentage increase. And if you're farming in Abbotsford, you look at Saskatchewan, you're like, that's pretty darn cheap. Now, the production capabilities in Saskatchewan versus Abbotsford, well, that's a big difference. And so if you're looking at it from that standpoint, you are going to be able to run the numbers and get a little analytical about it, and you probably do have a bit of a top. Now, one of the things that I have heard numerous times in the past week, Farmer Rapid Fire, we did on the Real Ag Radio podcast on Thursday. Mark Recker was on he's a farmer from Iowa. Okay, and I asked Recker about this because, and the Federal Reserve's been raising rates too, right? So this is just not a Canadian thing. I know sometimes it feels like it's kind of portrayed that way. That is definitely not the case. But, I asked Wrecker, do you think these rate hikes are going to slow the price of land down? He said it hasn't here either, okay, in Iowa. And so at first glance, you're like, how is this possible? Because it slowed down the real estate market, at least the volume of transactions for sure. And I think some of this is anecdotal, just talking, to people that follow this kind of stuff. I think volume has slowed. I think that is happening. But the values, maybe not as much. So what Wrecker said is that a lot of the land purchases around him are cash. People got cash on the sidelines. So they've basically been holding that cash and they're putting it to work. Now, that could be individual farms or it could be venture capital or things like that. So if you're buying something with cash, think about a house, you're not as worried about the direction that interest. You're worried about where the value is going, but you don't have any debt to service with that. And that's what people have been telling me has been happening. Stephen Vandervalk from Fort Macleod, Alberta, shared the same story with me here earlier this week. And I found that kind of interesting. It says two farmers, two totally different locations saying the same thing. It makes you wonder how much cash is on the sidelines, because that's not a forever thing. That's not a forever thing. Like how much, you think about, I grew up in Picture Butte, Alberta, okay, feedlot capital of Canada. Irrigated quarters there are probably now, I heard from a couple people this week about $4 million. $4 million for an irrigated quarter. That is steamy, okay? Steamy. How much $4 million quarters of cash is there sitting on the sidelines with some of these farms? I doubt that can, and maybe, if you're an accountant and you're listening to this show, you're like, okay, well, I got a better idea than you do. I would love you to share that with me, because I just have my doubts, especially if you think about a province like Saskatchewan where the 22 crop better, 21 crop was a bloody disaster. Okay? Like, it's not like we've had this big, huge run. Now, if we're thinking about Ontario, I can create more of a narrative around that. The 21 crop was record in Ontario, and prices spiked the fall. Okay, so not only did you have where we blew away the corn record in the province of Ontario by 15%, then we had prices spike like crazy, and it was like winning the lottery. And 22 wasn't much that different. Okay, input prices maybe caught up a little bit in 22, but still very good yields, good prices, lots of margin, cash on the sidelines. Maybe you paid down some debt. Maybe you had the cash sitting there. Now, if you're dealing with a situation where you're locked in on some lower rates, you're probably going to use that cash and put it to work in other places. If those mortgages are relatively new, you maybe going to use some of that cash to pay down some of the debt. In the prairies, though, we have not seen that kind of lottery-winning situations. And we may have pockets of it, but just not widespread. Not the same as what we've seen in southwestern Ontario. Now, if a lot of the land was being purchased by people from outside the area, like people from southwestern Ontario, I know of a couple examples where people from southwestern Ontario have bought some land in Saskatchewan, but assuming that a lot of the land transactions are from locals, I don't know. I don't think there's that much cash on the sidelines. I don't believe it. It just seems to be a little bit odd to me. So this is where I want to hear your feedback. And if I do run into you at the farm show next week at Ag in Motion, I want you to tell me what you think about it, because I'm super keen, interested in this. I can't wait to talk to JP Gervais from Farm Credit Canada about this as they do their land value report for the first 6 months, which is coming up here. It should be pretty shortly, right? I am fascinated by this, and in the back half of 23 as well. As the Bank of Canada, we're not slowing down. Unemployment very low. And until that number starts to go higher, it just feels like they're just going to keep on going. Yeah, things are getting expensive if you're servicing debt. Very much indeed. My email address is shaney@realagriculture.com. Let's take a break. We'll be back with more of RealAg on the weekend. I'm your host, Sean Haney, and you're listening to 980 CGME and 650 CKOM. RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday, we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire, and we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern, and don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to RealAg on the weekend here on 980 CGME and 650 CKOM. I'm your host, Sean Haney. We were talking about some of the weather challenges at the opening of the show, and there's no doubt there's bad pockets. Earlier I was talking to Chris Marley from Tisdale, Saskatchewan, earlier this week on the RealAg Radio podcast, and Chris pointed out, now I was under the misconception that I thought northern Saskatchewan was relatively okay. We know we've seen a lot of rain around that Prince Albert area. Chris is in Tisdale, and he shared with me, he's like, man, we have not had a lot of rain since the middle of June, beginning of June, and things are starting to go sideways. He was on the sprayer, and he was just sharing that, you're up top, you're getting to look at that crop from a really, really tall angle, and things are definitely not as good as they once were. We're kind of going a little bit backwards here, and there's some concern. So this has been kind of the story. Now, others have received, there's a balancing act here, right? Because there is, I need some moisture, but what I don't need is that Saskatchewan storm that rolls through and drops Fred Flintstone boulders of hail on my, okay crop. This is sort of the give and take relationship we have with Mother Nature. She's quite cruel, very cruel, very, very cruel. So big time variety out there when it comes to crops like canola. A lot of staginess, especially if you were dry early and you receive some showers. I've seen a lot of stagey canola. Other common thing I've heard is get into the crop. From the road, things look okay. Get into the crop, not good. So this is a common piece of feedback I've heard from a lot of you. So and never mind things like grasshoppers, right, which have been absolutely brutal in some parts. So earlier this week, I talked to John Dreger with Left Field Commodity Research, and we dug into canola and what to make of it going forward. And how do we steer through this volatility we've been seeing in the market? As canola has, it's like a rocket ship, and we'll talk about that. Here it is. So basically, I'll put it to you this way. Are we basically looking at halfway between 21 yield and 22? Is that the number that we would put on the board?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And I guess at this point, I would say for ourselves, we're not quite that pessimistic yet. But having said that, I mean, certainly, we're walking our number lower. And again, it's so hard to know because it's so variable. And 21, certainly we're better than 21. There's certainly too many areas. Yeah. I don't think anyone is sort of arguing or suggesting we're at 21 levels, but certainly there's maybe regions that do look like that. So, what's the right number? 38, 37 on a national basis, maybe lower, like it's really, really difficult to know. I think one of the things too, as you try and sort through it is, let's just say, for example, the northern half of Saskatchewan, which definitely looks better than the southern half, on average. That tends to be sort of a big yield, big production, bigger acreage area. So you sort of got to wait a little bit, maybe where those bushels typically would be. And so again, it's really difficult to know how to sort of handicap that in terms of what that final production is. But, if the number is 37 or 36, at that point, we're making some pretty deep cuts into what export potential is, and so then the follow-up question that we're thinking through with some of our clients is, what level does the market need to get to ration exports down to a number that fits the production? And that's a function of EU production and Australian supplies and so on and so forth. So there's multiple layers to the onion. But nonetheless, we are going to have to ration canola demand. And so is $800 canola the right or fair price? Obviously, soybean values have a function of that as well. But a huge swing in the relative value between canola and soybeans today. Those are all moving parts we're watching. underneath it all is we do have some real challenges with this canola crop up here in Western Canada.
Okay, so let's put our farmer hat on. We're marketing. What do we do about this? And a lot of producers are going to say, well, I don't know what my yield is. I'm not going to market. And I'm going to say, well, there's options out there, but we're not even going to get into that debate. If assuming that I am going to have some crop, we've been hearing from a lot of analysts we've talked to, and this is US and Canada, take risk off the table, sell into some rallies. But, look at canola. You could have got too aggressive too soon in the past month. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. But what do we do from here, John? How should we be looking at this? Are we going to be back to the contract high of 880, or are we going to be trading lower from here? How do we market in this?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge.
Not to put you on the spot, John. Not to put you on the spot.
I think that's fair, and I think it's an important question. And so, and these are conversations we're having with our clients as well. So I think first of all, if someone is really lightly sold and their crop looks okay, I think there is an element of needing to play a little bit of defense, and whether that's pricing a little bit, whether it's again you look at different tools, put options give you that downside protection with no production risk, all the upside, but they are expensive. But something like that, it would be something to consider. The one thing I'm really cautious about in these kinds of environments, it's easy to get caught up in it and being a bit blindly bullish. We can talk about rationing export demand. That might well be happening, and it might even happen at a lower price. I think about last year, for example, we did a lot of export demand rationing, even as the absolute price went lower, because we were still expensive on a relative basis. And so those are the sorts of things I think we need to be a little careful of. So if soybeans, for example, trade lower from here and EU rapeseed prices stay a little soft, maybe we don't need to go higher. And so those are the sorts of things where I'd be a little cautious about being presumptuous that we need to go higher, even if our yields are going lower. Having said that, I mean, if conditions stay poor and we start lopping multiple bushels off of this yield number, we could make another leg higher. That is a plausible scenario. But again, I think a person wants to not get overly aggressive because of that potential. But there is an element of playing a little defense. If a person's a little lightly sold, taking a little bit off the table. Again, I think seeing how soybeans trade over the next couple of days here, maybe that's a little bit of a warning, perhaps too. We can very quickly get really expensive on canola and suddenly look back and say, geez, our crop is getting smaller and yet our price is still declining. And that's a plausible scenario as well. So there's so much uncertainty right now, both on the demand side and the supply side. Again, we're always cautious about being complacently bullish in a market like this, even though the price is going up and the crop is shrinking.
Yeah, on that Nove contract, 880 is the 52-week high. But if you look at a 5-year chart, then all of a sudden you're like, we got a long ways to go, baby.
Well, that's right. And again, even some of the conversations we've had with clients this past week, and then the 2021 conversation comes up, and it's like, okay, so first of all, 2021 was a disaster everywhere. And I think, as we just said a few minutes ago, we're not looking at a 2021 yield number. Second of all, these other dynamics in 21 as well, in the middle of COVID and palm oil going through the roof and all those sorts of things. There's these other dynamics that all came into play as well. So I think it would be misplaced to say we're walking into a 21 scenario, of course, which is where the peaks of those charts are. But nonetheless, I mean, the crop is getting smaller. I mean, that's that part we know. It's just, is the market doing enough already? I'm not sure that it is. But it might be, and if that's the case, it's easy to look back, 6 weeks from now and say, you know what, maybe that crop fought through it a little better than we thought. Soybeans pull back. There's some demand rationing that's already taken place, and suddenly we're, $50, $75 a ton lower, and wondered what the heck happened, even though yield will end up being smaller than people thought it would be in May. We've been there before, right?
Yeah, well, and you look at, for anybody that sold canola at $1,200 for November, congratulations. You need to help me with my sports betting.
Yeah, that's right.
So to wrap up, if assuming this supply concern continues, we're getting a little bit late for rain to rescue some of this crop. It actually just maybe makes harvest worse in some cases. two supply concerns 2 out of 3 years. Does it give any caution to how much crushing capacity we could have on the prairies as we see a lot of that expansion based on renewable diesel and the potential there? But you got to have a feedstock. Does this sort of, I don't know, a sober second thought?
Yeah, we've thought a lot about that. We've done quite a bit of work ourselves with that for clients and some different studies we've done, thinking a lot about just all of that expansion of capacity and how these pieces all work. And I think there's pretty widespread consensus that there's maybe a little bit of room to increase acreage in Western Canada, but we're not that far from the ceiling, relatively speaking here, I think, for canola acres. And so it's yield that's going to have to do the work. And I think our peak yield was in 2016, something like that, 2016 or 2017. So it's been a long time since we've made a fresh high in yield. The last several years, it's struggled. Okay, you could say rain and maybe we get some better moisture conditions. Is there more going on? I'm not an agronomist. I'm not a scientist, so I can't speak to maybe the technical aspects of why we keep struggling to have yields. Some of the dryness concerns are obvious. But I think that's a pretty important question. Now, as you think about this crush capacity, I mean, these are probably the sorts of companies that aren't very likely to just suddenly, kind of change your mind and throw in the towel. The likes of Cargill and Louis Dreyfus and Richardson and so forth. I don't suspect that they'll make plans and then just suddenly kind of shrug their shoulders and change their mind per se. Does that mean that every plant will come online? I guess time will tell. But certainly, there's some questions on the supply side here going forward. If we don't tilt that yield trajectory higher, it's been a while where we've been stuck here and not getting any upside in yields. And certainly that has some implications here as all these plants get built.
That was my discussion with John Traeger of Left Field Commodity Research about this canola market that has definitely been one of the shining stars, definitely when it comes to the ag commodity markets. We'll be back with more here on Real Ag on the weekend, 980 CGME and 650 CKOM.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Smith of RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern for The Agronomists, Canada's only live, interactive, agronomy-based show. Each week, we answer your most pressing questions with a rotating panel of agronomists, researchers, and extension staff from across Canada. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, or head to realagriculture.com/live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
The next generation is the future of agriculture, but how do we launch from one role to leading? From succession planning and family dynamics to understanding finances and making the tough calls to discovering paths others have taken all through agriculture, the Successors Podcast covers it all. Tune in with me, your host, Kara Oosterhuis, simply by searching The Successors on your favorite podcast platform, or you can find it by visiting www.realagriculture.com.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
Looking forward to next week being down at the grounds at Ag in Motion just outside of Saskatoon. I think there's a lot of you who are going to be looking for the newest in technology, machinery, equipment, things like that. Walk through some plots. Some of you are just going to want to, maybe commiserate about what some of the yields look like. There's that. And if the weather's nice, just, cold beer. That'll be a big part of it as well. It reminds me of, I'm a huge college football fan. I love U.S. college football. And on College Game Day, there was, I think it was last season, they had the coach of Arkansas, and I forget his name. They won a big game, and Pat McAfee had asked him, what are you going to do tonight? And he's like, I'm going to go home and have myself a cold beer. I think that's what a lot of you will be doing when you think about some of just the year and the challenges that it has been in different parts, for sure. And I may join you. Why not? Especially if it's hot out. Yes, absolutely. Hey, speaking of Tuesday, I want to encourage you to check out, we're going to be down at the grounds, and I believe it's at 3 o'clock. Okay. It is the Sprouting Success Speaker Series, Ag Innovation in Saskatchewan and Beyond. And we're going to be doing this with Ag West Bio and Affinity Credit Union and Gap. And this is going to be a really good time. And we've got, which is really cool, is we've got Tom Wolf joining me. And we're going to really talk about some of the future of spraying technology and what this could look like and what are some of the things that are being worked on. What does it mean for you on the farm? So if you are down on the grounds, make sure you check it out. And I think you're going to be really, really pleased because Tom and I, longtime friend, and I love doing work with Tom. We haven't done kind of event like this for a while, and we're going to have a blast. So check it out down there at Ag in Motion. If you have any questions about it, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. And appreciate our friends at Ralco Radio for kind of organizing or putting me in touch with the people, the powers that be, to be able to do something like this. Really, really do appreciate it. And remember, I will also be with John Gormley at noon on Tuesday as well on the radio, which I'm really looking forward to. When you go to a farm show, what do you, like next week, what are you looking for? I think a lot of times farm shows come down to, I talked about the cold beer, but I think a lot of it comes down to, just, talking to people about farming. I think it's a big part of the show. I get to go to a lot of shows across the country and across the U.S. Like the only big show I have not been to is the Farm Progress U.S. show because it overlaps actually when I get a little bit of a downtime, and I always kind of try to go to the lake that week. And our team tackles that show and does a very good job of it. But if you think about all the other shows, I've been to them all. I have not been to because we don't talk about poultry a lot on Real Agriculture, so I haven't been to the big poultry show in Atlanta. Haven't done that one. That's at the same time as the NCBA Cattle Convention. That's one of my favorites, that big cattle convention. And this year it's in Orlando in 2024. But, you think about Crop Production Show, Manitoba Ag Days, the Old Farm Tech, Canada's Outdoor Farm Show, National Farm Machinery Show, Commodity Classic, NCBA Cattle Con. I have seen all of those and many times. So I could be a bit of a tour guide when it came to farm shows and conferences. There's no doubt about that. And we're going to do a bunch of, I got a bunch of speeches planned for this winter. I'm actually kind of gearing up already for the winter season. I am kind of looking forward to it. But not the colder weather, but the opportunity to see a lot of you. And one of the opportunities in the summer is an event like Ag in Motion in Indeed. For a lot, I've heard a lot of people like the demos. They like to walk through some of the plots. But the equipment demos are pretty popular based on some of the discussions I've seen on social media and talking to some of the farmers every week on the Farmer Rapid Fire on the RealAg Radio podcast. And so that's kind of what it's all about. There's no good time in the summer to do stuff like that. And some of you, I know, I've heard that you pull a camper out and you take the family and kind of turn it a bit of a holiday. It's, hey, you know what? Speaking of the holiday, this is interesting. I would love to know the amount of farmers that their holiday involves checking out other farms. And I've always wondered, do other industries do this? Like, if you're a firefighter, do you visit other fire halls? If you're a cop in LA and you're on holidays, do you stop in at the cop shop in Omaha, Nebraska? I don't think so. If you're a painter, do you visit other painters? No, I don't think this happens. I think it's very, very unique to us. It's the brethren. It's the connection that farmers have to each other, even when they don't know each other. That's the cool part. And that's very much, in a lot of cases, the farm show is all farm shows are about as well. So if you do see me down at the grounds, I would love to hear from you. And remember, I'm at Tuesday noon with John Gormley on the air. Looking forward to that. He's on location, I believe. And then in the afternoon, we're doing the Ag West Bio and Affinity Credit Union, hosting an event, the Spreading Success Speaker Series, and I'm with Tom Wolf, who all of you know quite well. So check that out, indeed. If you have any feedback on today's show, I'd love to hear from you. I want your thoughts. We're in the middle of the growing season. Weather is, Yeah, Mother Nature has not cooperated in many parts. But you can send me your commentary, shaney@realagriculture.com is my email. Of course, we're across all the different social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads. Yes, we're on all of them. Or you can call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Hope you enjoyed today's show. It was great chatting with you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much for getting real and getting connected with Real Agriculture. And we'll chat again next week, everybody. Cheers.